Sapience, The Search for Wisdom is a documentary that aims to tackle some of the biggest issues facing the world today and what we're doing, or rather not doing, to deal with them.
I think it's time that we as physicians and people started diagnosing the real cause of the illness infecting the planet.
If you go back and look at how civilizations collapse, the worse it gets, the more they retreat into a world of fantasy.
The world is absolutely out of control, and if I were to ignore it, then my life will just get steadily worse.
Without wisdom, we become an anarchic, self-defeating species.
And the film's creators are here, Jonathan Corbiere and Peter Brusik. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I wonder, as people even watch that short clip, if I totally hear what you're saying, that we need to acknowledge these things or they just get worse. But at the same time, I wonder if people watch and think, oh, I feel like I don't have space or room. You know, there's so much that goes on in everyone's lives, and it's just too hard to try to deal with world problems.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty heavy. We're talking a lot about ignorance. You mentioned it before, and really we're trying to redefine or rebrand how people see ignorance. So when you tell someone that they're ignorant, they get pretty defensive, as if you're telling them that, you know, they're not intelligent or that they don't know something. Mm-hmm. And what we're actually pointing out in this film is that we do all know what's going on, but we actively ignore it. And that's the ignorance that we're specifically talking about in the film.
Or we feel helpless to do anything about it. And is that
Right.
part of the ignorance you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it is very helpless for sure, and it's going to take a concerted effort, you know, on a collective, you know, cultural way to shift into not ignoring on a daily basis. But what we're trying to do in the film is actually offer up a solution. So the film is called Sapience, and it's about wisdom, which is this little kind of built-in trick that our species has that might be able to help us look at these problems in a much easier way and move forward in a constructive way to change them.
It's pretty much long-term thinking. We have to begin thinking long-term for future generations. Because if you look at it right now, we're not leaving a better world for future generations, for our children even. So we have to kind of somehow incorporate long-term thinking into our way of life, because right now it's very short-term. It's actually living in the moment. Right. You know, even companies, you judge a company by the quarterly profits that they make. Mm-hmm. You never think long-term, so we have to bring that back into our society.
Now, there are people that feel that they can contribute by making an individual effort to change something. Yeah. And you're saying we need to expand that. Somehow there has to be more of a collective effort.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really difficult on an individual level, and a lot of people, intellects, are saying right now that, you know, that's been the last sort of 20, 30 years, and it's kind of failed. It's very difficult in the type of world that we live in for the general public to make these big shifts. It has to be done on an individual level, but it also has to be done at a political level and at a global level. And our politicians aren't acting very wise right now, all around the world. And, you know, we need to bring forth something like a wisdom principle, which would essentially say, you know, any decision we're going to make, any law we're going to make, you know, any approval of some corporation's, you know, process that they want to do or extraction of resources that they want to do, has to be based on how is this going to affect, you know, 2 generations down the road? How is this going to affect our grandchildren? And this is a skill that's, you know, our species was named after. We're named Homo sapien, the wise people, because we're the only species that we know of that has the ability, you know, to take learnings and teachings from the past and apply them to complex situations and look ahead.
Right. Well, isn't this being done anywhere? Give me an example.
Well, I mean, you know, there's really democracies around the world that are functioning a lot better than others, where the people are able to get involved. I mean, you know, Switzerland's a good example of that. You know, you have progressive movements, especially, you know, in countries like Germany in their energy policy, that are thinking ahead and are planning, you know, into the future and saying, okay, you know, look at this nuclear disaster that happened in Japan. We're not going to allow any more nuclear plants to be built in our country, okay? We're going to start phasing them out slowly, right? Whereas, you know, in North America, we tend to be building more. And we're not really facing up to the potential problems down the road that we may have.
But, you know, someone might argue as well, and you talk about the triple crisis that civilization is facing, and the first thing is the end of cheap energy. So while we're on the topic of nuclear and things like that, and looking down the road, at the same time, there are questions that need to be answered right now. People need to put gas in their cars, and they need to heat their homes, and they need to do all of those sorts of things. So how do we reconcile both those needs at the same time?
Yeah,
I mean, that is a very difficult question right now, right? We got to make a change as a collective. Every individual is responsible, and we all you know, create this collective, or you know, modern society and whatnot. And we got to just pretty much, in general, a time will come. Energy will not be getting any cheaper. It'll be getting more and more expensive. What are families going to do? How are they going to afford everything? We're still in the recession from 2008. We haven't recovered from that yet. That's kind of, we learned from that a little bit of how it's not working with the crisis in Europe that you have happening right now. And that's also a huge problem. So you have all these kind of problems, even with the economy, that we're kind of ignoring as we move along. But you know, there will come a moment where we will have to make drastic changes if we don't do them right now.
Right. Are you two optimists? What is this movie changing?
Definitely.
You are. So you're not a fatalist.
No. So there's been several documentaries in the last sort of 5 years that have been talking about this topic of collapse, or you know, the foundation of our modern Western civilizations kind of breaking down, whether it's an economic collapse or an ecological collapse, or you know, whatever happens. And we wanted to face that, you know, but not, you know, present it as this doomsday situation, because it really isn't. We really truly think that retouching, reconnecting with long-term principles, and you know, reconnecting with wisdom, again, on a political and a global level, as well as an individual level, is extremely necessary and should be demanded of our governments and demanded of, you know, the United Nations and that sort of thing. Right. So, I mean, it is optimistic. And you know, the intellects that we're talking to, they, of course, have a lot of, you know, very scary things to talk about, and they're very concerned. But, you know, we do think that this could be turned around. It's a matter of turning it around, you know, slowly, not ripping the Band-Aid off 20 years from now and having a bunch of catastrophes.
Right. We have to wrap up, but this is still a work in progress, yes?
Definitely, yeah. It should be ready in January 2013.
All right, There we go. Well, thanks for coming in to talk about it, guys. Jonathan Corbiere and Peter Brusik, who are the producer and co-director of Sapience, The Search for Wisdom. It's an interesting conversation. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.